Good afternoon and welcome to Ask an Expert. Our expert today is Mari from Ask Resource Center. She's going to help educate us and unpack Transition Iowa. And if you haven't been there, please pull it up as she's speaking because that's the best way to learn about it as she goes through it.
Thanks, Deb. So I am just going to walk through the Transition Iowa website with you today. And I have just a real brief presentation quickly, just to help you to understand kind of where we've been. So today we're going to talk about the development of the Transition website and go through the different pages of the Transition Iowa website. And then one of our main features at the site is the roadmap and checklist. So I'm going to go through that a little bit with you and make sure you understand how that works. Transition Iowa is a website for youth and young adults with disabilities and their families and the professionals who support them. And the resources all are intended to encourage high expectations and successful outcomes for students. So we've got a lot of content on that website, really hoping to help folks understand all the different ins and outs of the transition planning process and hopefully supported with lots of resources along the way. So how many people have been to the Transition Iowa website? If you have been there, could you please raise your hand? It looks like we've got 8 raised hands. Awesome. Okay. Well, that means that there's a fair number of you that have not been there yet. So I am looking forward to showing you around. A process that we went through to create the Transition Iowa website is actually there was a website that was going called Transition Iowa for a number of years now. And over time, we realized that it just wasn't doing everything that it needed to. And so we went through a process of just revamping the site. And part of that process included some surveys. So we had more than 300 people that responded to the survey. We also did some focus groups that included parents, teachers, voc rehab staff, case managers, and other service providers. And then we also did a couple of resource reviews where every single resource that was on the website before was reviewed by at least 2 people, a parent and a professional of some type. And so with all of that information, we got so much feedback from so many people, and thank you to those who did that. Lots of different takeaways we found from the input that you all provided. Some of the things that people were asking for are what we started calling our priority topic areas. So some things like transition guidance, transportation, financial planning, housing and living options. And one of the big things that we heard from lots of different places, both the survey and the focus groups and the resource review, people were looking for something like a transition roadmap. So that was one of the big things that we hoped to be able to deliver on this site. As a result of everyone's input, we came up with what Transition Iowa looks like today. And there are over 300 resources there. There's some assessments and skill development activities. You can learn a lot about transition with the transition modules. We also have transition guidance from both the state and national levels. And I've included the transition resource directories from the different AEAs. And all of the pictures on the Transition Iowa site are Iowa youth with disabilities. So one of the newest features on Transition Iowa is the events tab. We are just getting going with that process and are always looking for new events. please send in any transition related events that you would like to share out. And I will show you what that looks like here in just a moment. The only events that we will not post are events that are primarily related to fundraising. It doesn't mean that if it's got a cost, we won't do it, but if the primary function of the event is for fundraising. Okay, so that is just a quick run through of, let's explore the Transition Iowa site. So I'm going to stop share and go to the site. Okay. So the Transition Iowa website, this is the home page, and you can see the different tabs here: transition planning, assessments and activities, resources, events, and contact. So down at the bottom, you can also find some of the top resources. So our transition planning roadmap, our activities for skill development, and the learn more about transition, where's the deep dive on transition planning. So I'm going to walk through a bunch of these different pages and let me know what questions you have. So first I'm going to go to transition planning. Really this page, and there's actually, you have to click it twice to get to the actual transition planning page. This is really the who, what, where, when, why, and how of transition planning, or at least that's the intention. So it starts really kind of general and broad. Why transition plan, and what is it just in general? The idea is that this could really be meant for anybody. So not just kids with IEPs, but it could be kids with, without disabilities even. This stuff is mostly focused on individuals with disabilities under IDEA, and then we go down further into folk rehab and WIOA. There's lots of good resources here: the local school plan, the pre-ETS agreement. You can get the high school contact list here. And then it kind of goes into when and who. There's a really great resource for person-centered planning here. Again, so if somebody maybe doesn't have an IEP or a 504 plan, some resources that could be helpful just in general for transition planning. So the next piece I'm going to take you to, sorry for the scrolling, is learn about transition. And so this page is the deep dive on transition planning. There is a lot of good stuff here, including the transition modules. These transition modules were developed actually originally in coordination with the PACER Center. And so there's 4 modules that are intended to really for families to help them to understand what's involved with transition planning, both focus on work or post-secondary education, setting high expectations, and then just kind of in general, introduction to transition planning. So those are some really helpful modules. These are just some random webinars that have been done around transition planning or related to transition. We have the transition resource guides from the AEAs. We also have some transition video vignettes, just some real short videos around transition. What does potentially eligible mean is something that we'll be talking about next week with Mary. A parent talking about transition fairs and the importance of transition fairs. And this is a video about graduation. And then we also have a few transition info sheets that might be worth printing off and taking with you to read, just real short informational sheets. So those are all of those resources there. Again, sorry for the scrolling. And then I'm going to go back and go to the Iowa IEP resources. And these are just some general resources that are specific to Iowa around transition planning and IEPs. I3 is the Iowa IDEA information site that is a really good resource for anyone that needs information about the special education process. We're hoping to be able to link the Achieve system portal for families before too long. We've got the procedural safeguards manual and just the Iowa Department of Ed's page on transition here. Also links to the AEA, the FEP, and Ask Resource Center. And next is transition guidance. And so this page is resources from both the U.S. Department of Ed and WIOA Administrative Services. There's all kinds of different topics here: transition planning, high school classes and transcripts, graduation guidance, work-based learning, and age of majority. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but I am going to go back to this transition roadmap. Oh, I was on it already. So here is the transition roadmap and checklist. This page is really what you a lot of the parents had been asking for, and professionals. The image that you have here was actually done by a family member, a parent of a youth with a disability who had recently graduated. And I just thought it was a really cool thing that she was able to put together for us. We wanted to have a graphic to go along with the roadmap and checklist, because the roadmap and checklist, just to be honest with you, can be a little bit overwhelming. The checklist is the short version of the roadmap. And so I'll do a quick show of the checklist. Is just very basic, 1, 2, 3 kind of check boxes, something that would be easy to take with you. But this roadmap has a lot more detail to it. The roadmap is broken into 3 different chunks. So it's elementary, middle, and high school. And, we really wanted to start early with transition planning, as far as even as early as elementary school. But just some pretty basic kinds of things. And again, it's kind of that who, what, where, when, why format. So we have, when is it suggested, who would be involved in the planning, what's the activity or outcome, and why, or what skills are we going to be working on, who is appropriate for this, and then any related resources. So every single action item has a related resource that goes along with it. So I'm just going to go back and show you the high school roadmap. And so as you can see, who to consider, sometimes it's all students, sometimes it's students with IEPs. I'm going to go down a little bit further here. This one is for any student with any disability related condition. So it really varies and is intended to be for any student, not just a student with an IEP or a 504 plan, but for all students. And just so an example of some of these things. So we're gonna, beginning sophomore year, it's really mostly the parent and the student's responsibility to keep disability documentation. Parents and students will keep updated information about the student's disability, and we give you some suggestions of some things that you might want to consider including in that, and then some resources. So this one is documents, an info sheet that's about documents to keep for transitioning to adult life. And just go down a little bit further here. So sophomore and junior year, we suggest that students that may need employment supports should work with the IEP team or voc rehab staff to explore options for supported employment or other employment services. We've got Iowa APSE and some information about Employment First as a resource here. So that's just a quick look at the roadmap. Let's see. Next, I am going to go to the Assessments and Activities tab. Here we have it broken into two different sections. So there's assessments, and here there are all kinds of different assessments, including a tool that helps IEP teams make decisions about whether or not there's a need for additional assessments. And then interest assessments, self-determination and self-advocacy assessments, functional living skills assessments, and just some other general kinds of things. And then there's also in the activities for skill development, we have, it's kind of similar, broken into different categories. The idea here is really that anybody could use these kinds of things, whether you're a parent or voc rehab staff, maybe working for some type of employment agency. You could really utilize some of these activities to help with skill development for youth with disabilities. Next, I'm going to go to the resources section. And there is so much information in these drop downs here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but living, learning, and working are the three kind of obvious categories. And then we wanted to make it as broken down as possible, but we did not include the 14 different categories that we came away with, the priority topic areas that I mentioned earlier. So just some random topics that we didn't feel like fit very well into the other categories. So just as an example, self-advocacy goes into lots of different resources here. You can click on any of these links to get you to the actual resource. And just going to go to learning, and some of them do have subcategories and some of them don't. So for learning, there's high school, post-high school, and accommodations. So it's really worth just kind of clicking around and checking out what you might be able to find. If there's something in particular that you're looking for, you can also use the search to type in here. So that is the resources section. And briefly, I wanted to ask for any of the parents or professionals that are on today. I know that you all have a lot of good resources that you probably utilize already. And so one thing I was wondering is, what is your favorite resource related to transition? If I don't already have it on this site, I'd like to include it. So if you could type in the chat, and even better if you've got the link handy there, what is your favorite resource related to transition? Whether that's a actual tool of some kind, like an assessment or an activity, or if that is a website that you use a lot. Please put in the chat if you have some resources that you want to share that you think others might benefit from.
Mari, we do have a question. Specialized resources around youth in the child welfare system. I'm not sure what that. if that's around transition or just in general. So,
I don't have anything that comes to mind right off the top of my head. So let me think about that a little bit, and I'm going to write that one down, and I will definitely get back to you if I can find something that I think would be helpful for you. Anybody else?
Mari, there's another question. It's
Okay.
about waivers. Is there information about waivers on this website? I know we have it on the Ask website. So
We do have waiver information on the site. So let me see if I can just find that. And really, I could just, let me see if it'll come up. So we have some different waiver information that pops up here. There is a long waiting list, but some basic information. In fact, I need to add our newer info sheet that Ask did recently about waivers to our info sheet section. But here's the few things that we do have on waivers right now. Okay. And so finally, the last piece I wanted to show you is the events tab. We have a section where you can post events or look for other events. We've got our webinars coming up here, and we also have a parent gathering for Voc Rehab. Their monthly gathering with questions with Susie Paulson is posted there. Looks like we've got another event for Transition Resource Fair, December 5th. So, and at the top is where you can submit an event. So please feel free to share out any events that you're aware of using this button here. Okay, and finally, this page has a contact form. If you have questions, comments, feedback, feel free to submit them here on the contact page. Those go directly to me. I would love any feedback that you all have. Thanks for joining us today.